Rent a Girlfriend season 3 just started, and it's the weirdest thing because it'll probably be the best season, but there might also not be a point in watching it, at least right now. The movie arc, which is where the second season ended and will probably take up the entire third season, is probably the second best arc, in my opinion. But a lot of the manga readers, at least online, say it's their favorite arc of the series. So everything from here on out is going to be spoilers and why I'm not sure if there's a point in watching it, and me just ranting about why I'm frustrated with the series and where it's at right now. So up to this point in the series, season 1 was a good setup. I like the idea, kind of a wacky situation where they get stuck together. Season 2 had some good drama, some nice moments. We get the thing with Chizuru and the engagement ring, which is all good. Season 3, I think, has better serious moments than both, and that's why I think it'll be the best season. Kazuya finally mans up and acts responsible and like a functional adult. And it's pretty apparent that Chizuru is into him at this point, even though she is in denial of it with herself or whatever. So this season has a really good but really sad scene where Chizuru and her grandmother watch the movie right before she dies, and Kazuya is in the hospital with her the whole time, which is obviously a really big deal for their relationship and just for her in general. And it really, I think, is a huge step forward in their relationship with where they're at. After she loses her grandmother, he spends like 2 full paychecks to take her out for a whole day, and she finally opens up emotionally and she cries on him, and it's a really good moment. I think it's really the first time that you see kind of behind the rental girlfriend mask, which is a big deal because she's always got her guard up and she finally lets it down. Unfortunately, progress in this series just gets perpetually reset. Like Pikachu, every time Ash goes to a new region, he's suddenly a level 1 again. After the movie arc, we get a couple small arcs, followed by a huge arc, which I think is the best arc, and should have been the climax of the series. And this is the Paradise Island arc. So Chizuru and Kazuya get stuck with his family, all of their friends, well, mainly his friends, Ruka and Mami, on a long weekend vacation trip together to the Paradise Islands, which is like a Hawaiian style resort in Japan. And in this arc, we get a ton of really big events. So we get Mami's backstory and why she's such a bitch. Kazuya again directly tries to confess to Chizuru, which he's done multiple times at this point, and she knows how he feels and what he's going to say and all that kind of stuff. And Mami reveals Chizuru's rent-a-girlfriend background in front of his grandmother and all of their friends, which is obviously a huge deal. You knew it was going to happen eventually. They kind of freak out and try to explain it as, well, it started out that way, but then they started dating, but he was too embarrassed to say anything. And Mami says, well, if you guys are really together, then you should just kiss. And she doesn't think that they'll do it because it would be a huge breach of the rental girlfriend contract. And Chizuru does it anyway. So to me, this was like the climax of the series, and it really should have kind of wound down after that. But instead of that, she ghosts him for 3 months with no explanation and starts the whole process over. It's frustrating because it just feels unnecessary, and also makes the characters, I think, kind of assholes, especially Chizuru. So after the 3 months, she starts talking to him again. There's an earthquake and their apartment is damaged, condemned. Kazuya doesn't have anywhere to stay. Chizuru invites him and Yamori to stay at her place for a month until they can find something more permanent. And this whole time, she's dragging this out under this guise of an investigation of her feelings, which it's been like a year and a half at this point. They've been through a lot. So the whole thing is just, it just doesn't feel like something actual humans would do. So they live together, and we essentially just get a bunch of day-to-day stuff and kind of very slice of life. And me summarizing it on a couple sentences might make it sound like it's been fast paced and there's still stuff going on and whatever, but it's really not. If this season ends where I think it's gonna, we're gonna be in the manga chapters around 180 to 190, and the current manga is currently approaching chapter 300. I think we're on 293 right now, with no end in sight as far as I'm concerned. This season will literally be less than 2/3 of the way through the manga by the time this season's done. So it would take 2 more seasons to even catch up to where we're at right now, and they still won't be together if you're an anime-only person. So, people are going to watch and do whatever they want. I can't tell people how to spend their time, but I feel like for people who don't know what's going on in the story, this knowledge might be helpful for your decision to spend your time on this or something else. And personally, if I was an anime only, I think I would just wait until I heard that the manga had either finished or made definitive progress in their relationship, then watch the season like binge style and binge the manga. And that way you're not waiting week to week to read 15 pages of monologues and a little bit of bait, which is kind of what we're doing right now. It's interesting though, because if you go on the subreddit for this series, I think the entire thing is pretty much people coping to try to make a big deal out of nothing and argue that there's progress even when there's not. And they write these pages long posts and they go into all this detail and how significant everything is. And good for them that they can enjoy it. For me, it's just become a slog. I kind of skim through it for 5 minutes every week and I'm like, same thing as last week. And I move on. And if you give any negative feedback on the subreddit, you get downvoted to hell. Even if you're not trying to be a dick, if you're just saying like the reasons why you're frustrated or why you think it's bad writing or whatever. But I guess that's what fans do. And I'm fine with filler chapters. Every series has them of every genre. But for rom-coms or whatever you want to call this story, maybe drama, cringe, I don't know. Filler chapters should be fun or funny. But I don't think the series usually does that. For me, a lot of what it does is drag out something that could be done in one chapter into 10. And then they throw in a little bit of bait and you're like, oh, maybe this is the time that they're going to take the next step forward. And then it doesn't happen. And this series has just been that over and over and over. And I think, in the beginning, you need that for a rom-com. But there has to be some kind of tension and drama and are they going to get together already and that type of stuff. You want to see progress in the relationship. But eventually it just becomes tedious. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. Even the last couple chapters, so like the 290s that we're in right now, they brought Umi back to confess. And he literally confesses, realizes that Chizuru's probably going to say no, and then just leaves. So I'm assuming, because right now that was the last thing that happened, was he confessed, said, I'll get your answer later, and then left. So I'm assuming, because Kazuya overheard it, we're going to get a few chapters of him being insecure. Maybe Chizuru kind of detaches again and drags that out, and just not much happening. I mean, for example, again, this was like 2 months ago. We had 4 chapters of them playing Twister, baiting some kind of pseudo-sexual encounter for like the dozenth time, only for nothing to happen. It's just tiresome. So I'm not going to keep going on about that. I just think from a general writing perspective, like if you're being neutral, I don't think when they get together at this point, it's going to be worth all the build-up. In general, the longer your build-up is, the bigger the payoff needs to be to make the build-up worth it. An example of this where it failed, for instance, would be Game of Thrones. So spoilers for Game of Thrones if you haven't seen it, and if you haven't seen it, don't bother because of this shit. So the White Walkers are built up for 8 seasons, 7.5. They get one shitty-ass long episode where they fight in the dark, killed off. They don't destroy anything. Nothing comes from it. And I kind of feel like that's where Rent-A-Girlfriend is heading. Because if you think about the plot points that they've used up, like Chizuru's grandmother dying and her opening up to Kazuya were both huge parts of her backstory and her personality and her motivations. And now that's been used after the movie arc. For the Paradise Islands, you finally find out why mommy's a bitch. Chizuru gets revealed as a rental girlfriend, which you knew was going to happen. She decides to side with Kazuya and kiss him. That's all really big stuff. And now you don't really have anywhere to go. I mean, there's a few threads that are open. I just don't know if you can build that amount of tension again and then have a good payoff when you've already used a lot of the plot points to get good payoffs. And just to give an example of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about dragging on the story or too much build up for not enough payoff. A good example of this would be Kaguya-sama Love is War. The Confession is the end of season 3. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth watching. And it's around chapter 132 of the manga. In 132 chapters, which is less than half of Rent-A-Girlfriend, it accomplished the main part of the story. And if you haven't seen it, it has about half a dozen characters who are really developed. You do have some filler chapters, but they're mostly funny. And they still move the story forward, just only a little bit instead of a lot. And Rent-A-Girlfriend, as far as I can tell, we're not going to get any kind of admission of Chizuru's feelings or them being together or anything until, I would guess, at least chapter 350, because the author has baited multiple threads that I think will be tied off before they get together. Although they could be tied off after they get together, so they could get together next chapter and then tie off these threads afterward. I just don't think they're going to do it. But these threads are, Umi just came back in. Mommy came back in a couple months ago, like 10 chapters ago or something. She just kind of popped in. Seems like she's going to like Kazuya and stir up drama. But she kind of blew her load in the Paradise Islands arc. Like, that's what I mean. The stuff with Ruka hasn't been around for a while, so she's definitely going to have some kind of part in causing chaos because Even when Kazuya says, I want to break up, she refuses. So she's still doing her blackmail thing. And I don't know. I just don't see them getting together before these problems have been dealt with. And the way that this guy writes, probably a third of the panels are inner monologues of him thinking about how hot Chizuru is, or how good of a person she is, or how even in this new colored shirt, she's still attractive, as if she'd suddenly be ugly. And that's just kind of his style, it seems like. He definitely doesn't write dense chapters, I would say. Of course, now that I'm shitting all over it and bitching, I'm assuming next week they'll get together and the following week it'll look like a hentai. So what the hell do I know? But I'm not going to keep going on too long. I just wanted to say this last bit about why I think it's frustrating. And it's not just the length or anything. It's frustrating because they've had a lot of good moments, big and small, throughout the series. And, they've had about 2 years together in the story. I can't remember the exact timeline because he has time jumps and stuff. But it's hard to believe that they wouldn't be together at this point when his feelings are so open. And she, I think, has been able to tell for a while that she's into him and just hasn't accepted it. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like something that humans would do, I guess. And an example of this is how I just mentioned about their grandmother dying and he's there for her and she cries on him. It's a life-altering, traumatizing experience for her. She lost her last family and he was the one who was there for her and she opened up to him, which is obviously a really big deal. And when you share that type of experience with someone, it's very intimate in a way that you're going to have a strong bond afterward. It's unavoidable. And now we're getting these arcs where it's like they're roommates because of the earthquake and their temporary living situation, but they were already neighbors. So nothing has really changed except now they share a bathroom. I know it's a little bit different, but they were literally a door away with one thin wall between. I don't think it's that big of a jump. And then we get these chapters where it's just day-to-day stuff. And he's like, oh, we're getting closer and she trusts me. And it's like, yeah, this stuff was all done prior and better and with more significant things in their life. So it's like we've already seen it done better. And now we're getting recycled lesser versions of it. And I think that's where the frustration comes in for me. And I'm sure I could think of more examples if I wanted to reread 300 chapters, which I do not. Like I said, I'm fine with long stories as long as it's purposeful. But frankly, it just seems to be dragging out for money at this point. I can't really think of another reason to tell the story like this. I would be okay if the story was bad, but doing different things, more than doing the things that are kind of pandering, but repetitive and just shittier. Like something that no one wants to see happen is Chizuru get with Umi. I think that would be a terrible decision just based on all the story and the characters and everything. But at least something like that, you can say, okay, well, he took a gamble and most people didn't like it. But it is way different because we haven't seen something like this before. But just getting the same reactions out of Kazuya over and over and him regressing to where they can't even have a conversation. And I don't know. It just feels like, to me, I actually think it's disrespectful to the fans, which I know is not a popular opinion because people will say, well, it's his story. He can do whatever he wants. And like, yeah, that's technically true. But at the end of the day, the fans are the ones who've made this guy rich, I'm assuming. I mean, he's sold millions of volumes and chapters, 3 seasons of anime, a live action show, merchandise. And to me, it just feels like he's milking the fans at this point, which I think is bullshit. I'm not going to go off on a huge tangent about this because I want to wrap it up. But, if you're a creative who's barely getting by, fuck it, tell your story. Do whatever you want because you're not milking anybody. You're not exploitative. If your story is going on forever, but you have all these different things you want to tell, like Bleach or One Piece, fucking go for it. I haven't read those, but the fans seem to love the last season of Bleach maybe more than the rest of it. So he's doing something right, I guess. But I just think adding bullshit chapters to essentially get more money out of the people who've made you rich and successful, I think is bullshit. You owe it to them that they've spent their time and money on you. Like they are the customer at the end of the day. Especially because it's not really accomplishing anything. I think it's going to lead to a pretty flat ending that the hardcore fans will cope and say it was worth it. I think most normal people are going to go, could have ended 100 chapters ago. And if it had been written better, it could have been 100 chapters shorter on top of that. There is something about writing where good writing is as short as it can be. Like if you can take out half the shit in your story and lose nothing, it's bad writing. So whatever. My whole point of this video was, is it worth it to watch season 3? Up to you. I don't care. It's your time, not mine. I do feel like the anime onlys and maybe even the manga readers should consider at what point is enough with this. Personally, I'll take 5 minutes every week and skim through the newest chapter and just be slightly irritated and move on with my day. But people have a limited amount of time and money. So I think you should choose where you spend it carefully. Anyway, up to you, whatever. Right now we'll get Kazuya gushing over her 100th outfit, I'm sure. If you watch the show, hope you enjoy it. If not, you're not missing much, at least in the long run. All right, if you're still here, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.